I'm gonna free my voice. Said I'm gonna free my voice. I'm gonna free my voice. Said I'm gonna free my voice. I'm gonna free my voice. Said I'm gonna free my voice.
Welcome to Intuitive Conversations, a show about intuition, spirituality, and growth. And I'm your host, psychic, medium, and intuitive artist, Nicole Bowman. If you are brand new to Intuitive Conversations, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of the show today and for sharing your light with me. And please take a moment to like, comment, subscribe, share, write a 5-star written review because when you leave reviews, that actually helps the channel to grow and build. So the show that we're going to be doing today is one that I've been thinking about for a while. In fact, I've been thinking about it all summer. And the reason why is because I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about the terms and information that I'm going to bring to you today. And so I want to dispel some myths. I want to clear up some things. And I also want to give you some tools so you can live your best life. So today, what we're going to be talking about is what it means to be an empath. What does that mean? What is an empath and what is empathy? I'm going to describe both for you, and I'm going to share how we apply it in our daily life. So let's begin by talking about empathy, what it is, what it means, and how we might experience it. To have empathy means that you can look at a person, place, thing, or experience, and you can pick up the mood. You can understand what they're feeling. You can understand what they're experiencing. You know it cognitively and intellectually, but you also feel it in your soul. You feel it in your heart and in your emotions. To be an empath takes it a step further. To be an empath means that you can look at a person, place, thing, or experience and instinctively know what it's like to be them. Meaning that you can see life through another person's eyes or you can walk in their shoes, and you do it naturally. So when people say, I am an empath, that is actually what it means, that they can look at or connect with a complete stranger and instantly know what it's like to be that person. Now, to be clear, you're never going to know exactly what it's like to be that person because you're not them. But being an empath is pretty close to that. I want to also explain that having empathy or being an empath does not mean that you agree with someone. It simply means that you understand. That I can look at your life, I can look at your experiences, and I can look at your circumstances, and I can feel in my soul what it's like to be you. And I can understand as well why you have made the choices that you made. Once again, being an empath and having empathy is not about agreeing. And I believe that that's the misconception. People think that if you have these abilities, you instantly agree with what a person is doing, or if their behavior is something that's not compatible with your energy, you don't hold them accountable. It doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable. It doesn't mean we don't hold ourselves accountable. It means that we can look at the process that got them there. We can look at the process that shaped that person, that shaped that individual. And the mark of a true empath is that you understand the person that people say you should at least want to. I remember many years ago, it had to be around 2017, and I was in the United States, and I had just come back from Europe. And at the time, a number of white supremacists were marching through Charlottesville, Virginia. And they were marching to protest the taking down of Confederate statues. And I remember watching them on my computer screen. They were marching with tiki torches through the town. And as I watched them and I absorbed what I was seeing, on their faces was anger and rage. But what I felt as an empath when I was watching these men march was joy. Now, I know that sounds strange. Why would there be joy in the middle of so much chaos? But you have to understand, to be an empath is not to look at what is obvious. It is to see what is underneath. It is to see what is hidden. And as I watched these white supremacists march through Charlottesville, what I felt was their righteous indignation. What I felt was their relief. What I felt was their joy at finally being able to show their faces, not hide in the shadows, and stand up and be counted. Now, to be clear, I don't agree with anything that I saw. I don't agree with white supremacy. It's not compatible with who I know myself to be as a spiritual being and as a child of God. But being an empath, which is a gift that God has given me, allowed me to put myself in these men's shoes and see life through their eyes. And a large number of them felt joy. There was rage as well, but there was joy because they were finally able to say the thing that they wanted to say. What I also felt for a small, select group of people was fear. Initially, they felt this righteous indignation that they could march through the streets and say what they wanted. And then it dawned on them that they had shown their faces and they were exposed. And what would that mean for their careers, for their families, for their education, for their reputation? What would that mean? So once again, the emotions were all over the place. And I'm not saying that I agreed with any of it. I'm not saying I was compatible with any of it. But I felt it, and I knew it, and I saw it. In that same display, on that same day, there was a young woman named Heather Heyer. Heather was an activist. She was a community member. She was a daughter. She was a friend. And she was marching against white supremacy. She was marching against fascism. And in the process of her marching with hundreds of other people, she was struck down by a white supremacist who hit her with a vehicle on purpose. On purpose. I don't sense that Heather knew, at least on a conscious level, that she could lose her life that day. But I do feel on a soul level and on a spiritual level, she felt that she was doing what was right. And to be clear, I'm in agreement with her. I felt what Heather felt to the best degree that I could, but I also felt what those young men felt to the best degree that I could. I remember many years ago thinking about Heather Heyer and thinking about how proud I was of her because she stood up to white supremacy. She stood up to Nazism. She stood up to fascism. And just to be clear, white supremacy is the idea that there is one race, the white race, that is superior to all others. Spirit often talks about how white supremacy is the false light. And the reason they call it the false light is because they say white supremacy is parasitic in nature. In order for it to exist, somebody else has to be on the bottom. So it essentially has to feed off of someone that they perceive it to be lesser in order to even exist. They have to interact with other people and interact this prejudice and racist theater in order for white supremacy to live and express itself and thrive. Versus love. The emotion of love, it doesn't require that at all because love is God. And when you think about people who are so full of love, they don't have to do anything. They just have to be. They just have to exist, and you will feel them. Versus when we're looking at fascism, when we're looking at prejudice, when we're looking at white supremacy, it needs a target because it is the false light. It sees the light in other people and it tries to siphon it. But the beauty of the time that we are in right now is that white supremacy is in its death rattle, meaning that it may not be able to exist much longer. meaning that it is falling and it is failing. And that is why in this time, in our collective moment, it is at its loudest. This is why, and this is how you use your abilities as an empath, as a psychic, as an intuitive, as a deeply spiritual and sensitive person to read the room, to read the energy, to commune with spirit, and to see what is happening around you. That is what our abilities are for. Our abilities are to keep ourselves safe, to read the environment, and to help uplift humanity. One of the things about being an empath, too, and this is a part I don't think is often talked about but needs to be, when you are an empowered empath, meaning that you're not cowering in fear, meaning that you're not giving people a pass for inexcusable behavior, but you're standing up, you're being counted, you're looking them in the eye. Another thing about being an empath and an empowered one at that is that you can generally predict what people will do. I've often in my life been able to predict and see in people things that they didn't see in themselves. And that could be for the positive or that could be for the negative. As empaths, we can see the potential in people. We can feel their thoughts. We can feel their emotions. And when you are aware of what a person would do or could do, you can keep yourself safe. Now, to be clear, it isn't going to keep you safe from everything, because if you have spiritual lessons that you need to learn, you're going to go through that. And sometimes that includes pain. Sometimes that includes sadness. Sometimes that includes loss or sickness. Sometimes, in the case of Heather, it includes the loss of life. Because Heather's purpose, we learned about her through how she lived, but we also learned about her through how she died. And sometimes that is a part of it too. But I will say, when you look at a person and you have a sense of what they are capable of, you know how to move out of the way, you know how to possibly avoid it, you know how to circumvent it. That's power. That is being an empowered empath. People often tell me that empathy or being an empath feels like a curse and not a blessing. It can feel like a curse when you don't know how to wield the power that God has given you. But when you understand that you have been given this gift to be able to see into other people and possibly help them live their best lives, you have been given this gift to be able to see situations and know what could go awry and possibly move the other way. That's where the power point lies. I want to talk about one other person with amazing potential, just to give you an example. There's a writer, an activist, a thinker named Christian Picciolini. Some of you may be familiar with him and some of you may not be. But many, many years ago, Christian Picciolini was a white supremacist. In fact, he was a neo-Nazi skinhead in the United States of America. And he was such a powerful and prolific leader at a young age that he led a movement. He led a movement. He wrote music. He performed. He was, by all accounts, incredibly popular. But there was a point in his life where things were starting to go downhill. He was having altercations with the law. He was having altercations with other people, and his life was de-evolving, if you will. And it was during the time that his son was born and he got married and he started working at a record store and meeting people from all different walks of life. That was when Christian started to become deradicalized. He started to become deradicalized because he was meeting people from many different backgrounds, and he could no longer justify feeling superior to them. He was also seeing the very negative turn that his life was taking, and he knew he didn't want that for himself. Couple that with the fact that his wife could no longer handle his behavior, and she wanted it to end. She wanted to walk away if he would not change. And so, through a lot of pressure, but also a lot of despair and self-reflection, he realized that the path that he was walking on was not the right path for him. And it took him some time. It took him therapy. It took him talking to people of color, LGBTQIA folk, everyone that he was told to hate. It took him time to use his empathy to learn from other people, to see life through their eyes, to feel what they were feeling and be a part of their world. As he extended his empathy to people that did not look like him, Christian began to change. And as he began to change, he realized the white supremacist movement did not serve his greater good. And it didn't serve the greater good of humanity. And so he left the movement, he withdrew from the movement, and he began to write about his experiences. Since then, he's done a number of television shows, and he's even written books about him being radicalized. And I think he is an example of that potential that I was talking about that we as empaths and we as healers can see in people. Each and every one of us is a spark of the divine in human form. But what we do with those gifts and abilities truly is up to us. And your gift and your voice can be used for the positive, or it can be used for the negative. At this time, Christian is using his voice to de-radicalize people and to give hope and healing to a community. And I think that that is what being an empath is. And that is what having empathy is. It's about healing. It isn't about being self-aggrandizing or feeling special. It's about using your God-given gifts to help others. And so, if you are still unclear about how to use empathy, take a person that you least want to understand and try to look at life through their eyes and put yourself in their shoes. And in order to do that, you're gonna have to divorce yourself from your personality. So as an empath, you're not looking at another person and saying, well, if I were in their shoes, this is what I would do. You're instead saying, if I was born in their town and their city with their set of circumstances, how would I view the world? How would I view love? How would I view relationships? How would I view travel? How would I view the foreigner? How would I view religion? How would I view things that are different from what I've been taught? And as you begin to question that, you begin to understand them. Now keep in mind, understanding is not the same as agreeing. But understanding is the first step. I hope that that helps you. And I want to thank you guys so much, as I said before, for sharing your light with me and being a part of the broadcast today. I want you to understand that being an empath is not just feeling and knowing and sensing what other people are going through, but it really is walking in their shoes and seeing their story. As I always say, remember to live your light, live your bliss, love yourself, and trust and follow your intuition. Ashe.
Free my voice, free my voice, free my voice.